Story 1. That's where they end up now. Under President Ronald Reagan, community mental health facilities were eliminated, pushing these people out into the streets. Police officers are usually not trained to deal with these individuals, and neither are the jail guards when they end up there. This is just one more problem with the healthcare system in this country. Story 2. We will provide them with shelter, food, and medical care, but in the most inhumane and least efficient way possible. Story 3. I work with the homeless at a shelter, and one of my clients is severely mentally ill. We worked with him and made huge exceptions to the rules for 3 years before he went into a complete crisis, including eating his own feces. We had no choice but to call the police to remove him and take him to a mental health facility. That was about a year ago. Thanks to Medicaid, he was able to get on the right medication, and seeing him now is amazing. He still has issues, but the change is so dramatic it is like he is a whole new person. We tried to get him disability benefits, but without even interviewing him, they denied his claim, stating that he should be able to hold a job. There is absolutely no way that would ever work, medicated or not. So, with the new Medicaid work requirements, he will lose his Medicaid, his medication, his new life, and now maybe even his freedom. This is inhumane and unacceptable. Story 4. Many of us are just a couple of bad days or a missed paycheck away from being homeless. Mental health resources are far from accessible, both financially and practically, when finding the right practitioner. We should be horrified, but the general reaction is hard to hear. Story 5. The majority of us would be horrified, but only a small percentage would have the ability to speak out and fight for them. Story 6. Depends on what for. Simply for being homeless or mentally ill. Yeah, that is unfortunate. But if they actually did something to warrant jail time, then that is different. Story 7. Allowing them to rot on the street is neither progressive nor compassionate. Former President Donald Trump does not know how to handle this properly, but someone should have figured it out long ago. Story 8. I love this concept. If you have ever spent time in a major city center, you know that the vast majority of homeless people are dealing with severe substance abuse and mental illness. It is not humane to do nothing. They need to be placed in treatment centers or mental health facilities to get the help they require. The next step is vocational training, followed by a halfway house setup to help them work and get back on their feet. Many people say it is inhumane, but they do nothing to help and simply turn a blind eye. Story 9. That is basically the process for them now. My mother was mentally ill and died homeless on the streets but was arrested numerous times before that. Story 10. Prisons are the largest mental health providers in this country already. The biggest factor keeping more mentally ill people off our streets is currently a lack of diagnosis. They are already there. If you are asking if I am okay with this administration expanding its assault on sick and poor people, then no. If you are asking how I feel about the state of our prison and mental health systems, they were abysmal before this administration and are set to get worse. Story 11. That is what we already do, and it is much more expensive, which is profitable for private prison contractors who know politicians, than giving them a tiny house and treatment. Story 12. I worked in the court and jail systems. This is what happens, more or less. Jails more often than prisons, but both. Story 13. As an American, the vast majority of those incarcerated for violent crimes are mentally ill. How can you be a serial killer, pedophile, rapist, or otherwise and not be? Story 14. Read something from a nurse, doctor, nurse practitioner, therapist, or someone related to the medical field in a prison. They said that a large portion of the people they worked with were mentally ill or had extremely low intelligence quotient. A majority of those people were in prison directly, related to their inability to function in normal society without some form of care. The person gave an example of a young man who was in prison due to illegal activities he committed while in a gang. The young man was well below the average intelligence quotient level and did not know any better. Story 15. This is another step in the progression towards oligarchs and corporations legally owning people and enforcing forced labor. This has been the objective for 160 years in various forms. Story 16. It is not humane to let mentally ill people with substance abuse problems live on the street. It is not humane for the person and not humane for the community. Many of these people need round-the-clock professional care, not just a hotel room and a few warm meals. Prison is not the answer, but we need to bring back medical facilities dedicated specifically to this cause, even with all the stigma attached to them. Story 17. They already are. This country does not care about its citizens or mental health. We do not have infrastructure for that. But we do have lots of profitable prisons. When all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Story 18. Look the other way. I cannot afford to get myself in trouble for those who do not care about me. Story 19. Die-esser included specific groups: the disabled, the mentally handicapped, and the abject poor. Project Action T4 is now active in America. Even when it seems clearly inhuman, the program will become less transparent. That is, individuals will disappear with less public visibility and be used for animal feed, biodiesel, or slave labor. Story 20. These individuals have either substance use disorders or mental health conditions that need to be addressed, either through institutionalization or rehabilitation. Allowing them to act without intervention has been the prevailing approach for the last 20 years and has resulted in increased crime and deteriorated, abandoned downtown areas. Story 21. The mentally ill are not sent to prison simply because they are mentally ill, although some may be more likely to commit certain crimes that lead to their arrest. No one has suggested imprisoning people solely for being homeless. The executive order does not state this. Homelessness is not a crime punishable by a specific prison sentence, and incarcerating homeless individuals would be very costly for taxpayers. Story 22. Any place you put someone that they have not selected themselves is a prison. However, I would feel a lot better seeing those people placed in an institutional setting than seeing them out on the street screaming, breaking windows, littering, breaking into cars, and living under a tree or a bush. People need to realize that not every mental illness is curable. Story 23. Not an American, but I hope Americans realize that the grand old party is planning to brand opposition to the regime as a form of mental illness to justify the mass detention of their political opponents. Story 24. Every country should open and invest in mental health institutions. Many were shut down because they were considered politically incorrect, but the world obviously needs them. Story 25. To imprison someone for not committing a crime would be wrong. Forced institutionalization ended in the late 1960s, but asylums continued to operate well into the 1990s. I don't know what the right answer is, but I know I wouldn't want to return to the style we had back then. This radical empathy approach isn't helping anyone either. Maybe we will do better this time, but that always seems like a risky statement to me. Story 26. The order is chilling. We know these are going to be subhuman conditions. It will be popular with his voters, and that is all that matters, really. I have disabled children who will need lifelong care. They are minors for now. I know these orders will continue up the chain of undesirables, and disabled people in general are not far from being targeted. I see people criticizing institutions. The implementation was certainly terrible. Far more oversight and accessibility are needed. Right now, we have disabled people who are too aggressive and violent to go anywhere. I know these families personally and have this worry for one of my children. I have friends who are dying, and there is no plan for their aggressive adult children. No one will take them. They go to the emergency room and sit in the hallway for weeks, then get discharged because there is no facility that will accept that level of need. Or it is 10 hours away, and the family has to find a way to move and get it covered by their state's Medicaid. One has told me her plan for her son is to abandon him in the emergency room and force the state to do something. We need facilities for these people in every state. We need court-appointed state guardians who have no more than 10 people they are responsible for. I have heard of some having hundreds or over 1,000. I am just sad. So many problems in our society could be effectively resolved, but they never will because some really rich people might end up a little less rich. Depressing. Story 27. Nearby cities and states give their mentally ill a free bus ticket to New York City and drop them off right here at Penn Station. They make a home on the nearby avenues or in parks, and the men usually die out while the women with addictions get taken in by larger groups of men who hang around the avenue and feed them drugs. It breaks my heart when I walk by an overdosed man. He was a little boy once. She was a little girl once. They had homes and families and celebrated Christmas once. To see them in torn clothes, covered in soot, roaches and urine, slowly dying while making eye contact that begs for even the slightest attention. Story 28. When this happens, it is already too late to show compassion. What should a private person do? Take the mentally ill people into their own house? Rent them a house? Pay for their food and medical treatment? In such a situation, a single person is almost always alone. One has to act to prevent such circumstances. Story 29. It's important to remember most Americans are only one emergency away from being homeless themselves. Would you want to go to prison because you lost your home to medical debt or another type of emergency? It is essentially making it illegal to be poor. If someone is homeless, it should be the exception, rare, and the result of refusing care, not the result of failed American institutions. Story 30. Another day in Los Angeles or New York. Mental illness and chronic homelessness have essentially been criminalized in most cities. Story 31. Have you ever seen or read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? That is what is going to happen because that is Donald Trump's view of what is proper. Story 32. The fact that we are even considering this question is horrible. There are many reasons a person could become homeless, many of which are due to circumstances beyond their control. There are numerous mental illnesses that people we see every day suffer from, and anyone looking would have no idea because they are functioning within society. Story 33. It has been happening. Mentally ill people receive no help and end up in prison. The big difference is that soon the government will intervene before they commit a crime, and weak centrists will remain silent while bigots applaud, until the day they are targeted themselves. Story 34. This is a mess. How will we pay for this? Mental health funding has been critically cut, which is why we see so many more homeless people. Now they will create billions in more debt to build prisons and employ heartless and cruel authoritarian Americans to make America great again. It is hard to watch the United States turn into another dictatorship. Story 35. I expect it from this administration, sadly. I fully believe Donald Trump wants to put all the people he claims are undesirables, such as immigrants, homeless people, and queer people, into camps to sell them as cheap labor. I hope I am wrong. Story 36. They are already in prisons due to the crimes they committed. The United States closed hundreds of mental institutions. As a former corrections officer, I dealt with many mentally ill and formerly homeless individuals. Story 37. I work in a prison. We are ill-equipped to support those suffering from mental illnesses. They are extremely exhausting, and they are often over-medicated or under-medicated. Prisons are run down, and space is limited. We are essentially warehousing individuals with no programming opportunities. Story 38. Many homeless individuals intentionally engage in behaviors that lead to incarceration because, in prison, they have access to medical care, food, and housing. It is unfortunate, but that is how the current system operates. Story 39. They always let my aunt out. It makes me upset because she cannot stay on the street. Then the state hospitals discharge her. It is sad. Story 40. I would be horrified. Long-term health care and social services worker. People are in the streets to begin with due to lack of supports. Story 41. I would like to say I would be surprised, but I am not at this point. America's default solution to problems has always involved police officers and prisons. Under the current administration that introduced Alligator Alcatraz, I would expect nothing less. Story 42. America leads the world in incarcerated citizens per capita. This flawed incentive is giving law enforcement more reasons to incarcerate additional people. This situation needs to stop. Story 43. Prison is for convicted criminals. Incarceration of homeless individuals and those with mental illness is unacceptable. Story 44. This is already happening, and our officers, emergency personnel, and jail staff are overwhelmed. More importantly, it is not their field of expertise. They have been forced to deal with this issue, which has gone unchecked, as has the taxpayer public. In Los Angeles, there are many vacant buildings and areas that can be used to house them. Concerns about inhumane conditions overlook the fact that the current living conditions are atrocious. Almost anything is a step toward a healthier, safer life for everyone. The handouts must stop. Some refuse to adopt out their pets but do not want a room, yet this terrible cycle continues. Allowing someone whose mental capacity and addiction are severely compromised to make decisions is reckless. Jail is not the solution. Thanks to Ronald Reagan for closing the mental hospitals, to China for drugs harming generations, and to every politician, research and development official who has allowed this to disrupt every taxpayer's life. You have our money. Fix it. Begin remodeling with the bare essentials and use facilities as makeshift lockdown hospital-like centers. Let individuals detox under care. Stop all Narcan use, including double doses 2 or 3 times a week. Incentivize education for those in social services to encourage work in these facilities. Here is a starter. If you are caught bringing drugs across the border, dealing or manufacturing illegal substances, not including marijuana, you should face the death penalty. That would serve as a deterrent or a swift resolution for those involved. Story 45. I will react with horror, but what does one do? It is not like throwing eggs at the buses is going to help. Story 46. I think it is where we are headed, and I believe that the majority of people in this country would support it. Story 47. First day? This has been happening since President Ronald Reagan's administration. It is wrong and inhumane, but life continues because the working class will be steamrolled if they attempt to stand up. Story 48. Seeing that happen to homeless people would upset me because I am one unfortunate event away from being homeless myself. Mentally ill people being locked up would not bother me because I grew up in Chicago and have seen many mentally ill people attack innocent people for no reason. Story 49. They belong in a rehabilitation facility with social workers, people who can help them. We have the money to do it right. They will not be doing this. They will be locking them up and abusing them just like they used to. Watch The Changeling, the one with Angelina Jolie. That is a very accurate portrayal of that system. It is extremely difficult to get out once you are thrown in there, especially if you are a woman. I would say God help us, but I do not believe in God. Story 50. I have seen videos of homeless drug addicts being forced to go to rehabilitation centers. They are taken against their will and made to attend treatment. I believe this happens in Pakistan. Story 51. I think every person experiencing mental illness who is living on the streets should be taken to a care facility. There are few reasons to leave these individuals outside, using drugs and potentially putting others at risk with their unstable behavior. Is there a recent study on the percentage of homeless people who have mental illness? I believe it is a significant percentage. Story 52. First they came for the immigrants and I did not speak out because I was not an immigrant. Then they came for the homeless and the mentally ill. Story 53. I saw it in Nicaragua. Children were pointing and laughing while their parents carried on regular conversations. It made me want to stay home. Story 54. I would have to quit my job. It is unpleasant, but they already know I am not going to tolerate that kind of behavior. Story 55. I would say what a waste of people and resources. We should bring back homesteading for anyone in the bottom 30% income bracket. Just because someone does not fit into the nearest city's vibe does not mean they cannot live fulfilling, free, and dignified lives while simultaneously expanding the reach of our shared culture and civilization. Obviously, that conflicts with the government agenda of giving everything away to wealthy criminals, but they do not matter. Story 56. The people will do nothing. We have had known Zionist pedophiles sitting as president for the past 10 years, and people have not done anything. Story 57. I would be sickened by it, but realistically there is nothing I can do. Run up and take the gun away from the police officer? No, I would get shot. Block the police car? No, I would get arrested. What could the average German do to stop the Holocaust? What could the average Russian do to stop Joseph Stalin? Story 58. Horrified, of course, but I am horrified at the black bagging that is happening now. I suppose I would be even more scared since I am in that demographic. Story 59. Well, Former President Donald Trump just signed an executive order that will allow housing for homeless and mentally ill individuals. Based on how well they are doing deporting criminals, let's see who they classify as mentally ill. Story 60. Someone who doesn't live in a city with a lot of mentally ill people will probably be strongly opposed to it. As someone who lives in San Francisco, we desperately need this here. Few people are as dangerous as someone who is truly mentally ill. It seems like nearly every day you hear of someone assaulted by someone who is mentally ill. Story 61. I am just waiting to go to a camp. I take medication, and my symptoms are controlled, but nothing matters these days. I earn 6 figures and am a productive member of society, but bigotry guides these people. The Nazis targeted people with disabilities before they targeted Jewish people. Story 62. The executive order is frightening to me. It seems to be so vaguely worded that it can mean anyone they do not like is mentally ill, especially since some people have tried to make Trump derangement syndrome an official mental disorder. Story 63. I would probably think it is better than texting people who are waiting for trains or setting their hair on fire next to me while I am walking to work. Story 64. Work and re-education camps are coming. This is an autocratic move. It is a classic case of using the law to eliminate the symptom, not the disease. Homelessness is a financial issue. Mental health is a health issue. Drug addiction is a health issue. Note that nowhere is it a criminal issue at its root. It may lead to criminal behavior, but you are plugging a hole in a collapsing dam. Focus on the root causes and you eradicate the problem completely. That said, you do need a mechanism to, sadly, force people to accept help. Story 65. The same way, I would respond to Donald Trump's current handling of the immigrant problem. I cannot post my text because Google made errors, but I will try to recall. The current immigrant problem is a mess that is very serious and is largely Donald Trump's, Ronald Reagan's, and the Republican Party's problem. We have had an immigrant problem going back at least 150 years, and probably further than that. All that has been done is to ignore and worsen the problem. Illegal immigration has served employers and the Republican Party well. That is why nothing has been done about it. Employers have always been looking for cheap labor and have pitted legitimate Americans and union members against foreign sources and illegal immigrants for a very long time. The treatment of the Bracero program workers and of current illegal immigrants are just 2 examples. Many unscrupulous employers have knowingly employed illegal immigrants along with labor contractors for decades. It has been a profitable arrangement, as Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa probably knows. Many Americans have refused to do dangerous or low-level work, such as hard field labor, for low pay. Employers and contractors have turned to illegal immigrants to solve their labor problems. These workers will do hard, dangerous, and child labor for very little money and will not complain. Donald Trump's and the Republican Party's current response to the illegal immigrant problem supports their plan. Employers and labor contractors knowingly hire illegal immigrants under the table. They also pay them under the table and deduct Social Security, Medicare, and taxes from them in the same way, most likely keeping the money themselves. When illegal immigrants try to collect benefits they have paid into, they are usually denied or receive payments fraudulently. The agencies are understaffed and state and federal governments, especially under Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush and the Republican Party in general have only made the problem worse. How would Donald Trump and the Republican Party run a private business? Any business and government run on money, products, staff, and necessary equipment. Could you run a business like Donald Trump and the Republican Party are currently running the governments as Ronald Reagan did? You would be out of business quickly. The Immigration and Naturalization Service, now Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has been badly run for decades and has played into the hands of Republicans, plutocrats, and unscrupulous employers. There is little doubt they employ the worst people to police their enforcement operations. An employer only has to call Immigration and Customs Enforcement and report a problematic illegal employee. Enforcement will handle it from there. The situation has worsened under Donald Trump. The entire matter is very serious and should have been dealt with legally and humanely decades ago, but it has not. Why? Story 66. I am not American, but I have seen the Patriots with their tactical gear and assault rifles making sure the government did not interfere with their hair appointments, so I am sure they would step up and stop it. Story 67. This is not about the homeless. This is about criminals being able to say anything about anyone at any time with zero accountability, often acting as sociopathic or psychopathic violent offenders. We need citizen arrests allowed for these violent criminals, including the police, Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and those impersonating them. We also need accountability for improper handling, abuse by unnecessary force, and failure to act correctly. State governors need to change rules. Community service should be required, and actions should be judged by a jury. Forget these sociopathic individuals. Do you feel your family is safe? I do not think any of us do. The only ones who might are those unaware of how to find accurate reporting or those who want to behave that way themselves. They should be incarcerated. Story 68. When, not if, you see homeless and mentally ill people transported to prisons. When you see homeless and mentally ill people transported to prisons. Story 69. Horrified. The Donald Trump administration seems to be taking its blueprint from Nazi-era eugenics. I have been homeless and I have mental health conditions. I would not pass my genetics on because no one needs the problems in my gene pool. But imprisonment is inhumane. Story 70. There is an inflection point coming for cities overwhelmed by the crisis of homelessness and street crime. Compassion fatigue is real when people are getting stabbed just trying to get to work or meet friends. Forced rehabilitation has worked in some places, but when nothing else moves the needle and the government runs out of both ideas and backbone, forced removal stops sounding cruel and starts sounding like the only sane option left. It is not pretty, but neither is pretending this crisis will fix itself. Story 71. I live in a city with a major homeless issue. It is a regular occurrence for homeless people to randomly attack or rob someone. It is not safe for a city to have thousands of drug-addicted, desperate people living on the streets. Our current strategy is to do nothing and let more innocent civilians get attacked, raped, and robbed. The main issue is that violent offenders do not stay in jail long. They can commit assault and be released from jail 3 days later. We absolutely need to impose 5 to 10-year sentences for this kind of violence. Story 72. Prison psychiatric inpatient facilities are some of the best staffed and cleanest in the world. Most patients in prison psychiatric inpatient units are thankful to be there. They credit the program with saving their lives. Story 73. So they get a roof over their head, medical attention, and meals instead of braving the elements and wrestling with rats for food behind a dumpster. I would be fine with that. Story 74. Getting treatment and medical care would not be bad, I think, and I would not mind waking up and not finding that a person has defecated on my doorstep during the night. Story 75. At least in prison they would have access to water, food, and shelter, and would not have to panhandle or walk the streets risking their lives every day. What is the worst of the two evils? Story 76. Imagine when they start classifying Democrats as crazy people or other undesirables. That is what this is. It is a pretext to lock people up and throw them away. Gulag Archipelago. Story 77. We have homeless and mentally ill people and drug addicts walking around on the streets of many large cities. Their activities used to be illegal. Maybe they still are but are being tolerated, including drug sales, drug use, defecating on the sidewalks, panhandling, discarding needles on sidewalks and roads, selling stolen merchandise on the streets, selling prepared foods without a permit, robberies, sexual assaults, and throwing waste at people. There used to be vagrancy laws. What happened to them? If there are laws and these people are engaged in illegal activities, cities should have a way to manage the problem, including incarcerating them until trial. Otherwise, sidewalks fill up with waste from illegal activities. Other people want to use these sidewalks. Don't they have the right to walk without being exposed to this? Somehow, we need to instill a sense of accountability, or else everything deteriorates. Story 78. It is unique that I occasionally scan a report at work. Let me tell you, what you hear people saying about why they were transported will chill you to the bone. You might think we are all safer on the streets living life. People really do have mental breaks and commit crimes, harm themselves, or harm someone they know. They are not legally allowed to take someone to jail or prison without a judicial process. I think it is a good thing that psychiatric hospitals are reopening and are heavily monitored by outside officials for appropriate levels of care. Story 79. I would ask this. Do you think how people are living on the streets is cruel? Unseen, surrounded by dangerous people with no restraints, no help, no shelter, relying on themselves? You can say that there are shelters, and this is true, but the people who have these issues don't get the help they need there for a variety of reasons. The main one is underfunding. Also, rules like remaining sober keep many people from seeking help. Now, my issue with imprisonment is in the details. What would this look like? Would there be treatment? What level of security would someone like this require? We have done nothing, and it has not worked. It has not helped the homeless, and it is ruining our communities. It is clear if you look around. My area has gotten much worse over the last few decades. It is infuriating. The rest of us have to live with it. Something has to change. Story 80. Like a German in 1933, bad but kind of terrified. My group could be next. Older people cannot carry their weight, and Elon Musk. Story 81. The same as now. I would only be able to watch and feel bad. The average person does not really hold power. Story 82. That already happens every day. Donald Trump is just taking credit for what was already happening, as usual. Story 83. I would say, that is awful. As I drive to my low-paying minimum wage job, which is the only position I could obtain despite having a degree. Story 84. You have seen how American society is. More often than not, people do not get involved when someone is injured or being assaulted. This is known as the bystander effect and the not my problem mentality. People are already divided on immigration and issues related to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. Mentally ill and homeless individuals receive even less concern from people. Story 85. We are in real danger of historical level cruelty in the United States. We will not get enough angry people until it is impossible to ignore. Story 86. Cui bono. It would be cheaper to house the homeless and institutionalize the mentally ill. Yet instead, the first thought is incarceration. Someone is profiting from other people's misery, always at the expense of the taxpayer. Story 87. There is apparently not enough space for detention centers right now. Where will the federal government get the money for these? It is time for Donald J. Trump to submit his resignation letter. Story 88. How is Donald Trump doing something so massive and far-reaching solely through an executive order? There should be outrage for that part alone. We do not have kings. B. His plan is very vague and leaves out a lot of details. How will this be paid for? Where will they go? How will this work? As someone with a mental illness, this is extremely concerning. I am not homeless. But, like with how the immigrants were going after the criminals, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement is now arresting children. This could happen to people like me. See, they are going to demolish the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act and start going through private medical records and detaining people that way. How is this not eugenics? Story 89. Yes, that is who they started with the last time as well. We had to fight a war to stop them back then. It looks like we are the people they have to fight to stop it this time. This says a lot about those who voted for this. Story 90. As an Angelino, I read weekly about homeless attacks on innocent locals, tourists, or other homeless individuals. One man in Santa Monica shot 2 children and then a police officer. There are stabbings, lewd behavior in public, and human waste on front lawns and sidewalks. I support getting homeless individuals into treatment. There are ongoing scandals involving the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority with $24 billion unaccounted for. These ineffective cash grabs must end. Story 91. I would be okay with it only if it was voluntary. As criminal inmate populations decline, let us convert some prisons into homeless communities. Story 92. That is where some of them need to be. Is it really a better life for them living on the streets? Some of these people are violent, and they are not being cared for at all. What about when the cold weather comes? We cannot let people who need mental and physical help and care lie on the streets like trash. Story 93. It is time to bring back the old mental health institutions. The current system of release and medication did not work well. It is difficult to say, but some people cannot manage their own affairs and need to be institutionalized. The vast majority of homeless people have significant mental health or substance abuse problems. They should not go to prisons, but some type of institution is definitely needed for many of our homeless population. Story 94. You cannot help people who do not want to help themselves. At a minimum, they can help clean the streets for the rest of us. Honestly, they are better off in detention than dying in the streets. Former President Donald Trump just signed an executive order addressing this, and honestly, I think it is the way to go. Story 95. I think we should go back to setting them adrift in the ocean or shipping them to a deserted island. There is no shortage of people and we could use a lot less. This is a start. Story 96. Great if they are going to get help. Standing out in the hot California sun. Skin peeling off their faces as they beg is not compassion. Story 97. I am conflicted. No one should be incarcerated for simply not having a home, but if they are off the streets, getting fed, and possibly receiving medical attention. Even if it is not complete, it is better than nothing. Those who complain about homeless people being moochers on the system, and who vote for a certain political base, will be quieter while their tax dollars go to feeding and housing those who are taken in. Story 98. Sadly, it is often about funding and breaking the law. Illegal drug abuse and sale are often the most common crimes among these groups, with many other crimes also associated. Many officers are not prepared to deal with the mentally ill. There have been initiatives to create special divisions in law enforcement specifically for the mentally ill and programs to help the homeless achieve prosperity in society. However, defunding the police has cut the divisions dedicated to the mentally ill, and many homeless programs have been used as money laundering and theft schemes by corrupt politicians. At this rate, due to rampant complaints and hostility toward law enforcement, it may seem fair to allow complete chaos and anarchy to ensue. After enough murder, rape, theft, death, and federal intervention, further hatred would shift to a racist agenda rather than the rational cause of social distress. Defunding the police assumes they are the sole perpetrators of all crime, regardless of whether these institutions even exist. Much of this was seen in the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Portland, Oregon. Without police, the area became unsafe even for paramedics, and multiple people died. This was blamed on the police, as if they chose to be defunded. Defunding the police also reduces funding for police education and training, perpetuating the cycle. Extreme political overreaction has poured gasoline on a fire instead of water. Corruption and evil exist wherever people are present, but when essential societal functions are cut, everyone suffers. Common sense is not difficult. Just breathe and think. Story 99. I would be fighting whoever came to my car doorstep to take me away. I don't need to be institutionalized or arrested. I need a home. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.